Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to a time before central heating, before supermarkets, before the idea of comfort food even existed. You're standing in a small medieval village, surrounded by frozen fields that stretch endlessly beneath a pale sky. The wind sneaks under the gaps in your wool cloak, biting at your fingers and ears. The ground is so hard it could crack your shovel. Somewhere, a rooster crows weakly, confused. Perhaps, by the frost that never seems to melt. You pull your hood tighter and glance toward your hut, where a thin trail of smoke rises from a tired chimney. You wonder, not for the first time, what you'll eat tonight. Spoiler: it's not great. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive here for more than 2 days. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the frozen earth, boots crunching over a thin crust of snow. The air smells faintly of smoke and mud, two scents that define winter in the Middle Ages. Your breath clouds the air as you glance at the empty stretch of farmland that, months ago, shimmered with golden wheat. Back then, you worked from sunrise to sunset, harvesting every last grain, knowing this moment would come. Winter was the enemy everyone saw coming but could never truly prepare for. Inside your cottage, the walls leak cold like they're conspiring against you. A single candle flickers, its flame trembling from each draft. In the corner, a clay jar holds the last of the oats, enough for maybe 2 more meals. You run a rough hand along the wooden table, feeling every nick and groove. It's not just furniture, it's a witness to every desperate winter you've survived. You sit down, elbows on the table, staring at the small loaf of bread. Hard, gray, and cracked, it could probably double as a weapon. The smell is faintly sour. Like damp hay, you take a bite anyway. It hurts your teeth, but hunger has a way of making even misery edible. The bread was baked weeks ago, stored in the chimney where smoke keeps mold away. You chew slowly, imagining it's warm, imagining it's fresh, pretending for a moment that your jaw isn't tired. Outside, the world is still. No birds, no buzzing insects, no laughter, just wind. The silence of winter has a strange weight, it presses on you. Heavy but familiar. You remember the words your mother used to say, "The earth sleeps now. And so must we." But sleep doesn't fill the stomach. You poke at the small pot near the hearth. Inside, there's a sad mixture of turnip skins and yesterday's pottage, a stew of everything and nothing. You stir it with a wooden spoon, scraping the bottom for flavor. A few bubbles rise and pop lazily. It's not delicious, but it's warm, and that's what matters. In this season, warmth is worth more than taste. You hear footsteps outside, your neighbor, Thomas, wrapped in a blanket that used to be a sack. He pokes his head in and grins, revealing a gap where a tooth used to be. "Still got turnips?" he asks hopefully. You nod and hand him a bowl. No one in this village eats alone if they can help it. Misery, when shared, feels a little lighter, like the heat from 2 fires placed close together. The 2 of you sit by the hearth, slurping quietly. The stew tastes faintly of ash, but neither of you complains. Thomas tells you that his wife tried to make bread yesterday, But the flour was mostly ground acorns. Tastes like dirt, he laughs. But at least it's crunchy. You both chuckle, because if you don't laugh, you'll cry. Humor is another kind of heat. Later that night, as you step outside to empty the ashpan, you glance toward the sky. The stars are painfully clear, glittering like ice shards. You imagine each one is a tiny candle, held by someone up there who's also trying to stay warm. The moonlight spills across the fields, wide, white, and silent. You can almost hear the earth dreaming beneath the frost, waiting for the sun to return. In the distance, the faint howl of a wolf reminds you why you keep the fire burning all night. Food isn't the only thing scarce in winter, safety is too. You close the door and push a wooden beam across it. The fire crackles softly. The shadows on the wall dance like weary spirits. And for a moment, you almost feel cozy, almost. You crawl into bed, pulling the coarse blanket up to your chin. The straw mattress rustles underneath you. It smells of dust and old sweat. But it's better than the ground. Your stomach grumbles one last protest. Tomorrow, maybe you'll trade that old copper spoon for a handful of barley. Or maybe you'll just stretch the pottage another day. Medieval economics at its finest. As you drift towards sleep, the room fades into shades of amber and smoke. You think of spring, of green shoots, of warm bread, of laughter in the fields. But those dreams feel far away, like another lifetime. For now, there's only the whisper of the wind, the soft hiss of the dying fire, and the quiet reminder that surviving winter isn't about feasting, it's about waiting. The next morning, the cold greets you before your eyes even open. Your breath fogs the air above your face. And for a second, you wonder if you've somehow fallen asleep outside. The fire is long dead, reduced to a gray circle of ash. You pull the blanket tighter, pretending it still holds warmth, and tell yourself you'll get up in a minute. Maybe two, but the frost creeping up the window makes that impossible. So you groan, softly, because there's no energy for drama, and swing your legs over the side of the bed. The floor is ice, literally ice. You hiss, muttering a curse that would make the village priest faint, and fumble for your boots. They're stiff as wood, coated in a fine layer of white. Outside, the world looks clean, silent, and heartless, like beauty and misery wrapped into one picture. You step out anyway, because hunger is louder than cold. The path to the root cellar is short, but in winter, even short feels eternal. Your boots sink slightly in the frozen mud, each step releasing a soft crunch that echoes in the empty air. The door to the cellar is low and heavy, covered in frost. You have to lean your whole weight on it before it gives, groaning open like a stubborn old man. The air inside is damp and earthy. It smells of soil, onions, and something faintly sour, a smell that means life, or what's left of it. You light a tallow candle, and the flickering flame reveals the quiet treasure within: wooden crates, clay jars, baskets filled with roots, cabbages shriveled but still green, carrots with frost-bitten tips, a pile of turnips that could survive an apocalypse. These are the jewels of your winter kingdom. You reach out, brush dirt from a potato, and smile faintly. It's soft in places, but still edible, better than bark bread. You mumble. Medieval farmers weren't fools. They built these cellars deep underground to trick nature itself. to keep the Earth's warmth trapped beneath. It's a small miracle of survival engineering, built not by nobles or scholars, but by hands like yours. As you lift a basket, a tiny mouse scurries past. You both freeze, the kind of mutual understanding that only two desperate creatures can share. You let it go. Who are you to deny another soul a bite to eat? Back upstairs, the smell of earth clings to your hands. You rinse them with cold water from the barrel, flinching as your skin tightens from the chill. The roots thump onto the table, carrots, parsnips, turnips, and one lonely onion, a feast by winter's standards. You start peeling, the knife slipping once or twice, your breath steaming with each sigh. You toss the scraps into the fire, not for flavor, just to see them burn. The stew pot is already blackened from months of use. You drop the roots in, pour some water, add a pinch of salt, your last, but worth it, and set it on the fire. The smell begins to rise, sweet, smoky, humble, the kind of smell that makes you close your eyes and pretend the world isn't frozen outside. Thomas knocks again. He always does. You wave him in. Got something good today? He asks. His voice hopeful. You tilt your chin toward the pot. He inhales deeply, then lets out a theatrical sigh. You're rich, he jokes. You laugh, because in this world, a few vegetables can make you royalty. As the soup simmers, you both sit quietly, watching the steam twist like ghosts dancing above the pot. Thomas tells you about an old superstition his grandmother used to whisper. If you store a carrot with dirt still on it, it remembers the warmth of summer. You grin. Then I should have left the whole field unwashed. He chuckles, tapping the side of the pot. Doesn't work like that. You can't trap seasons, just moments. You ladle out 2 bowls and pass him one. The soup is thin, but it glows faintly in the firelight. You taste it, earthy, bitter, sweet in places. Each spoonful feels like a memory of sunlight. You think of the days when these roots were still in the ground, their leaves trembling in warm wind, bees buzzing lazily around the edges of the field. That feels like another world now. Somewhere outside, a bell tolls from the small church down the road. 1, 2, 3 slow rings. The sound travels over snow like breath over glass. It means another villager has died. Probably an old one, or maybe a child. Winter doesn't care whom it takes. You and Thomas pause, lower your heads for a moment, then continue eating. The stew cools quickly in the draft. Life goes on, even when it shouldn't. Later that afternoon, you check the cellar again. You count the baskets like a miser counts coins. You estimate 3 weeks of roots left. Maybe 4 if you stretch them thin. The thought makes you sigh. The cellar is both comfort and anxiety, a reminder that survival is always a calculation, never a guarantee. You run your hand along the stone wall, feeling the chill sink into your skin. It's strange. This underground chamber feels more alive than the frozen world above. Here, the earth hums softly, holding your food, your hope, your future. It's a partnership, you think, between hunger and ingenuity, between decay and preservation, the medieval version of working from home. Except your job is not dying. When you climb back into the open air, the sky is already dimming. The sun is just a pale smear of light behind clouds. Smoke rises from chimneys all around, carrying the same faint scent of boiled roots. Everyone's house smells like yours. Poverty has a shared perfume. You look at your frostbitten hands and flex them slowly. They ache, but they still move. You breathe in, tasting smoke and dirt and life. The cellar's secret still warms you from within, not just the food it hides, but the stubborn will it represents. You whisper to yourself, barely audible, the earth never really dies. And for tonight, that's enough comfort to keep going. You wake to the soft hiss of the fire, a small miracle in itself. A few glowing coals survived the night, buried beneath ash like hidden treasure. You blow gently, coaxing them back to life. The flame flickers, then leaps up with a reluctant sigh, like it's as tired of winter as you are. The air smells of smoke, damp wood, and something faintly sour, breakfast. In the corner sits yesterday's pot, half full of what used to be stew. You give it a stir. It's thick now, congealed into a lumpy paste. You wrinkle your nose, but your stomach doesn't care. Welcome to the miracle of pottage, the all-purpose, endlessly recycled lifeline of medieval life. It's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's soup, it's porridge, it's whatever survived the night. It's not glamorous, but it keeps you breathing. You pour a little water in to loosen it and add a pinch of barley. The grains will take forever to soften, but patience is the one thing the cold teaches best. You crouch beside the fire, listening to the bubbling pot and the occasional pop of wood. The rhythm is soothing, almost musical, a kind of humble symphony of survival. Medieval farmers didn't waste food, mostly because there wasn't any to waste. Pottage was a living thing. A constant stew kept warm for days or even weeks, growing thicker and stranger as new ingredients were tossed in. Leftover bread, a stray onion, maybe a bone if you were lucky. Each day it changed flavor, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, a culinary gamble, centuries before refrigeration. You sip a spoonful and grimace. It tastes gray, not in a poetic sense, literally gray. The turnips dominate, earthy and bitter, with an aftertaste that could strip paint. You add another handful of oats, hoping to disguise it. The pot sighs and bubbles again, like it's judging you. You imagine it saying, "Still better than starvation," and you have to admit, it's right. Outside, the village stirs. Smoke rises from thatched roofs, and faint voices drift through the still air, the sounds of other fires, other pots, other people clinging to the same miracle. You step outside for a moment. Bowl in hand, frost clings to every surface, glittering like tiny shards of glass. The world is brutally beautiful. Somewhere a child laughs, the sound cutting through the cold like sunlight. It's rare, that sound. You savor it like a warm drink. Thomas waves from across the path, a wooden spoon in his hand. "Pottage again?" he calls. You grin. "Always." He nods solemnly. "You know what my wife says? A good pottage is like a marriage. Gets thicker the longer you stir it." You laugh, nearly choking on your spoonful. "Does it also smell worse with time?" He shrugs. "Depends who you ask." When you return indoors, the room smells faintly better, or maybe your nose just gave up. You add a scrap of salted meat from the hanging rack, a prize saved from last week's trade. It hisses as it hits the pot, releasing a whiff of something rich and familiar. Suddenly, this isn't just survival, it's luxury. You grin, because you know exactly what's happening. The pottage gods have blessed you today. You lean back against the wall, letting the warmth from the fire seep into your bones. The spoon clinks softly against the bowl. And for the first time in days, you feel content. The meal isn't good by modern standards. But in this century, it's a masterpiece. No forks, no plates, no seasoning beyond hope, and yet, somehow, it satisfies. Historians still argue about what exactly went into a medieval pottage. Some say it was primarily grains and vegetables. Others insist there was meat when possible. The truth, you suspect, is simpler. It contained whatever didn't kill you. Recipes varied by region, by season, by desperation. In summer, it was light and fresh. In winter, dense and weary, like the people who made it. You imagine future scholars studying this pot centuries from now, cataloging each root fragment, each grain of barley. You picture them frowning thoughtfully and declaring, "Ah yes, a balanced medieval diet." You'd laugh, if you weren't too busy scraping the bottom for one last spoonful. After eating, you set the pot aside. You'll keep it warm for later. Because in this world, nothing ever truly finishes. Every meal bleeds into the next. Just like the days, you glance toward the window, where sunlight struggles to break through the frost. The light dances across the steam, painting the air in faint gold. For a moment, it almost feels like summer, if you don't blink too fast. You think of how people in your time complain when their soup is too salty or their lattes too cold. You smile quietly. If only they knew the joy of scraping a pot clean and calling it dinner. The kind of gratitude that grows from scarcity, not abundance. The smell of pottage clings to everything, your clothes, your hands, the wooden walls. When you lie down tonight, you'll dream in shades of brown and gray. But somehow, you'll sleep with a full belly. That's all survival is, really. A series of small victories disguised as bland stew. As the light fades, you tend the fire once more. The pot sits quietly beside it, ready for another day, another experiment in endurance. The air hums softly, filled with smoke and the faint promise of tomorrow. Outside, the wind howls against the door, but the fire crackles louder. And as you rest your head on the rough straw pillow, the taste of warmth lingers on your tongue, humble, earthy, eternal. The next day begins with hunger again, the kind that sits quietly behind your ribs. Waiting, you wake to the sound of wind scratching against the door like an impatient visitor. The fire has gone out. The air inside your cottage is so cold it feels solid, as if you could reach out and break it in half. You rub your hands together, wishing friction could make bread. On the table sits the last of yesterday's loaf, a dull, cracked thing the color of old wood. You rap your knuckle against it, it makes a hollow sound. Like knocking on a coffin. Still edible, you mutter, though you're not sure if you mean for humans or for the fire. You take a bite, it resists. You chew anyway. That's what medieval bread does, it fights back. The truth is, real flour is running low. Wheat and rye are luxuries in a harsh winter. The harvest months feel like distant myths now. And whatever sacks of grain survived have already been traded or stolen. Which means you've entered the desperate chapter of the menu. The one where bread isn't really bread anymore. You've got a sack of bran, coarse and bitter. And beside it, the secret ingredient that no baker in their right mind would admit to using, bark. Yes, actual tree bark, stripped from the birch near the stream, dried by the fire, then ground to powder. You mix it with a little bran, some water, and a pinch of salt. That's it. You knead the paste, trying not to notice the smell, earthy, woody, faintly like chewing a library. When it bakes, the cottage fills with a smell that could almost be called pleasant if you were feeling generous. You pull the loaf from the fire and tap it. It sounds promising, firm but not rock hard. You slice a piece. Inside, it's dense, heavy, and a strange shade of brown-gray. The texture is, let's call it, experimental. You take a bite and immediately regret your optimism. It tastes like survival, bitter, dry, but unmistakably alive. You chew slowly, your jaw working like an old millstone. The bark flour sticks to your teeth. Forest cuisine, you whisper, trying to laugh. It's the kind of humor you invent when the other option is despair. Thomas stops by just in time to witness your culinary achievement. Is that bread? He asks. Eyes wide with admiration or horror, hard to tell which. You nod solemnly. Bark and bran. He stares. You're eating trees now? You shrug. Why not? They've been watching us starve all winter. He laughs, the kind of rough laugh that warms the room better than the fire. You'll grow leaves by spring, he says. You grin, tearing him a piece. Only if I survive long enough. He bites into it, grimaces, and immediately reaches for his mug of small beer to wash it down. Tastes like punishment, he wheezes. But I've had worse. You both chuckle, because in truth, you have. This bark bread isn't just folklore. It's what real peasants made when grain ran out. In bad winters, and there were many, families mixed ground bark with straw or acorns to stretch their rations. Historians still debate whether it provided any nutrition or just tricked the body into thinking it was eating. Either way, it kept people alive, mostly. You think about that as you finish your slice. Crumbs falling onto the table like dry snow. Each crumb feels like a quiet rebellion, a way of saying, I'm still here. Hunger might stalk the village, but you'll meet it with bark and grit. The day passes slowly. You spend hours gathering firewood, though the trees look skeletal and accusing, as if resenting you for eating their cousins. The snow crunches underfoot, and the air tastes sharp, clean, merciless. You pause by the frozen stream. Gaze at your reflection in the dull ice, hollow cheeks, red nose, eyes that have learned the language of endurance. Back home, you reheat the rest of your bark loaf by the fire. It hardens more, if that's even possible. You break it with a knife handle, the crust shattering like pottery. You soak it in warm ale. And suddenly, it becomes edible again. Not good, not pleasant, but soft. The transformation feels magical, like turning a rock into bread pudding. You sit quietly, dipping and chewing, while outside, the wind hums low through the cracks of the wall. You think about how people centuries from now will talk about this life, maybe call it romantic. Simple, pure, you almost snort out your drink. Simple, you murmur. Sure, nothing simpler than deciding whether to eat bark or starve. But there's something strange about it, too, something grounding. Each mouthful connects you to the land, literally and metaphorically. You're part of the same cycle as the trees. The roots, the dirt. It's not comfort, but it's meaning, and in this world, meaning can be just as nourishing. Before bed, You wrap the last half loaf in cloth and place it near the hearth. You run a hand across it gently, like it's a fragile relic. The bark bread is ugly. Yes, bitter and stubborn, but it's proof that the human will to live is even tougher than hunger. You lie down on your straw bed, your stomach not quite full but not empty either. The fire crackles softly, a lullaby for survivors. Outside, snow falls silently over fields and forests alike, covering trees, cottages, and all the desperate hearts trying to outlast the cold. Somewhere between waking and sleep, you whisper a promise to yourself. When the fields turn green again, you'll never take bread for granted. You'll remember this taste, the taste of bark, of hunger, of survival, and you'll smile. Because you made it through one more day. By now, you've accepted that winter has no mercy. Every bite of food is a negotiation with nature, a quiet deal that says, "Let me live another day, and I won't ask for flavor." But flavor, as it turns out, does sneak back in occasionally, disguised as salt and smoke. You stand beside the hearth, staring at a slab of pork hanging above the fire. Its surface glistens faintly in the orange light, hardened by days of slow curing. The smell is thick, comforting, part salt, part wood, part hope. This is your treasure, preserved meat. The medieval equivalent of having a savings account. You slice a thin strip with your knife. The blade scrapes against the tough surface. It's chewy, almost leathery, but when it hits your tongue, the salt floods your senses. It's overwhelming, but glorious. You close your eyes. For a moment, it's summer again, pigs fat in the meadow, laughter in the air, a sun that didn't feel like a distant myth. Medieval farmers didn't have refrigerators or vacuum-sealed packets. Preservation was an art, or maybe alchemy. Salt, smoke, and cold were your allies. You'd slaughter the animals before the deep frost came, because feeding them through winter was impossible. Then you'd rub the meat in salt until it looked like it had rolled through snow. The salt drew out every drop of moisture, and every bit of joy, but it kept death at bay. You hang the cuts near the chimney, where the smoke curls up like an invisible blanket. Slowly, the meat transforms, gray turns golden, fat turns firm, smell turns irresistible. Over time, it becomes something miraculous. A piece of summer you can eat in February. The villagers come by sometimes to check on their own strips of pork or beef, hanging side by side like ornaments of survival. Thomas shows up with his usual grin. "Yours looks done," he says, pointing to the darker piece near the center. You nod proudly. "Aged to perfection." You reply. He snorts. "Perfection died in November." You both laugh. Still, there's reverence in the air. Each piece of smoked meat represents a victory over rot, over hunger, over time. Salt was expensive, often traded for grain or labor. The church even taxed it. Because of course they did. But no one complained too loudly. Complaining burns calories you can't afford. You hand Thomas a slice. And he bites down, eyes closing as if he's praying. "Tastes like sin," he mutters. You smirk. "Then we'll call it divine." The two of you sit by the fire, sharing small pieces and smaller jokes. The world outside is merciless. But here, in the glow of smoke and salt, there's peace. You watch the light shift across the walls. Soft and gold. The meat crackles faintly in the fire's warmth. whispering promises of another meal tomorrow. Somewhere deep inside, your body hums with gratitude, not just for the food, but for the ritual. Preservation isn't just survival, it's defiance. You're taking something that should decay and telling it, not yet. You're freezing time and flavor. Historians still argue about which methods were better, salting, brining, or smoking, but to you, that debate is nonsense. What mattered wasn't how you preserved it, but that you did. A salted ham could last months. A smoked fish even longer. Some families stored them in barrels of brine so strong it could strip paint. Though that wasn't a problem since no one painted anything except saints. Later that night, you wrap your precious meat in cloth and hide it behind a pile of wood. Food envy is real, and theft is a winter crime few can forgive. You sit quietly for a while, staring at the flicker of embers. The smell of smoke clings to your clothes, your hair, your skin, but you don't mind. It's the smell of endurance. As you stretch out on your straw bed, you think of modern kitchens, of people throwing away leftovers because they're a bit dry. You laugh softly in the dark. If only they could taste your smoked pork. It's tough, salty, borderline painful, and somehow the best thing you've eaten all week. The wind rattles the shutters again. You pull the blanket closer. Tomorrow, you'll trade a slice for some barley or maybe a candle. You'll joke about it, as always, because laughter fills the spaces hunger leaves behind. You close your eyes. The fire's glow pulsing gently against your eyelids. The world outside is white and silent. But inside, there's warmth, faint, flickering, real. You drift off to sleep with a piece of salted heaven tucked safely away, and the comforting thought that, just for tonight, you've outsmarted the cold. The morning air smells faintly of smoke and something sharper, richer, cheese. You blink yourself awake, momentarily unsure if it's a dream or the real thing. Cheese in winter is like gold. People talk about it the way poets talk about love. You sit up quickly, blanket falling to the floor, and shuffle toward the shelf where your last wheel of it rests. Wrapped in cloth like a sacred relic. You unwrap it carefully. The rind is hard now, cracked like dry earth, but beneath it hides a pale, buttery heart. The smell hits you first, earthy, tangy, a little sour, and oddly comforting. It's not the clean, neat scent of modern cheese. This one smells like the barn that birthed it, milk, hay, and a hint of struggle. But to you, it's the perfume of survival. You slice a thin wedge, the knife squeaking slightly against the dense surface. The texture crumbles, half firm, half tender. You take a bite, and your entire body seems to sigh. It's salty, creamy, alive. You close your eyes and for a moment, you're back in summer, cows grazing lazily in green fields, flies buzzing in the heat, the sun dripping gold over everything. Cheese wasn't just food in the Middle Ages. It was memory preserved in flavor. A farmer's time capsule. When milk was abundant in summer, villagers transformed it into something that could outlast the cold. Curds pressed, salted, dried, patience made edible. And when the world froze, you'd unwrap that little sunlit circle and taste a season long gone. You remember making this one. You and your neighbor, Greta, standing by the fire in late August, stirring the curds with wooden paddles. She'd hummed as she worked, a low tune about saints and storms. "Don't rush it," she'd said. Good cheese is like good people, needs time and pressure. You'd laughed then, thinking she meant marriage. You realize now she meant survival. You take another bite, slower this time, letting it melt on your tongue. The salt tingles. The fat coats your mouth. Heavy and satisfying, you feel warmth bloom in your chest. Like fire under skin, food can do that. Even in this frozen world, it can remind you that pleasure isn't extinct. Thomas arrives right on cue, stomping snow off his boots. You hoarding treasure again? He asks. Sniffing the air, you grin and hold out a small slice. He takes it reverently, like accepting communion. You made this? He asks. Eyes wide. With Greta, you reply. Ah, he says, chewing thoughtfully. That explains why it doesn't taste like despair. You snort, nearly choking on laughter. For a moment, the two of you just sit there, chewing in comfortable silence. Cheese doesn't need conversation, it speaks its own language. It tells you the cows survived. The milk didn't sour. The hands that made it were steady. In a season defined by scarcity, every bite is proof that something worked out. Historians still debate which cheeses medieval farmers preferred, soft or hard. Cow's milk or goat's. But you know the truth. The best one was whichever didn't rot. Some were stored in clay jars, buried underground. Others hung from rafters to dry in smoky air. Each household had its own secret. Yours? A touch of ale in the curds before pressing, not for taste, but luck. You glance at the small wedge left on the plate. It's not much, but you decide to save half for later. That's the rule of winter. Eat what you must. Save what you can. Hope it's enough. You wrap it again in cloth. Gently, like putting a child to bed. Outside, the snow has stopped. The world looks clean and quiet, as if it's holding its breath. You step out, the cold biting at your face, and exhale a misty cloud that feels like surrender and defiance all at once. Somewhere in the distance, a cow lows softly, an echo of summer still alive under the frozen sky. You smile. The cheese in your belly warms you more than any fire. It's strange, really, how something so small can hold back despair. Maybe that's the lesson winter teaches best. Survival isn't grand or glorious, it's quiet, stubborn, and often smells faintly of milk. That night, as you sit by the fading fire, the cheese's memory lingers on your tongue, rich, human, forgiving. You close your eyes and think of Greta's words again, time and pressure. Maybe that's not just how cheese is made. Maybe that's how people are, too. You smile in the dark, the warmth of the day still alive in your chest, and whisper to the night, good cheese, good people. The wind rattles softly in agreement. Morning comes slowly, filtering through a haze of smoke and frost. The fire is little more than a sullen glow, the kind that barely remembers being flame. You sit up, throat dry, tongue heavy. The air feels like it's made of sandpaper. You need something to drink, but water. Well, that's not exactly safe. You grab the small wooden mug by the hearth, sniff it, and grin faintly. Beer, or rather, something pretending to be beer, thin, flat, slightly sour, and weak enough to hydrate a baby goat. But it's clean, and that's what matters. You take a long sip. Feel it run down your throat like liquid bread. The taste is earthy and warm, faintly sweet from the barley. It's not luxury, it's survival with bubbles. Medieval farmers didn't drink water much, not because they were picky, but because it could kill them faster than winter itself. Rivers were full of runoff and waste, and wells weren't always deep enough. So instead, everyone, from the youngest child to the oldest crone, drank small beer. A low-alcohol brew made from the same grains that filled their bread bowls. It wasn't strong enough to make you drunk, but strong enough to keep you alive. You pour another mug from the barrel in the corner. It sloshes lazily, the color of weak tea. The smell reminds you of baked bread and damp hay. You take another sip and sigh. Breakfast is served. The process was simple: barley or oats soaked, boiled, fermented for a few days. No hops, no fancy barrels, no golden foam, just necessity in liquid form. You remember brewing this batch weeks ago, stirring the mash with a wooden paddle, praying it didn't spoil. When it finally turned out drinkable, you nearly cried. You'd made safety. You'd made peace in a cup. Thomas knocks on the door, he always does, and steps in. Shaking off the snow. You start early, he says, eyeing your mug. Breakfast of champions. You hand him one without a word. He gulps, wipes his mouth, and grins. Ah, warm and miserable. Perfect. You both laugh. Beer isn't about pleasure here. It's about comfort, the ritual of pretending things are normal. Every sip says, "We're still here." It tastes faintly of barley and stubbornness. Across the room, the fire flickers to life as you throw on another log. You grab a crust of bark bread from yesterday and dunk it into your beer, softening it just enough to chew. The combination is, surprisingly, not terrible. It's salty, smoky, faintly sweet. Liquid bread, Thomas mutters, chewing thoughtfully. Bread you can drink, bread you can chew. I see a pattern. You smirk. Bread is the beginning and the end. He raises his mug. To bread, he says. You clinked yours against his. And to beer, the only thing keeping us civilized. Outside, the village stirs. You hear laughter somewhere, distant but real, the kind that comes from people who haven't forgotten how. Someone's playing a rough tune on a pipe. Children chase each other through the snow. It's strange how beer does that, not the drink itself, but what it brings: warmth, conversation, a reason to stay awake when the world tells you to hibernate. Historians still argue about how strong medieval beer was. Some claim it was barely alcoholic. Others that peasants were perpetually tipsy. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in the middle, sober enough to work, buzzed enough not to despair. You refill your mug again, this time adding a drizzle of honey, an indulgence saved from autumn. The sweetness transforms the taste instantly. You hum in satisfaction. Luxury. You whisper. Thomas eyes you. You're turning fancy. You laugh. Don't tell the Lord. He'll raise my taxes. The two of you talk for a while, about nothing important. Because important things hurt too much. The beer warms your insides, softens the edges of thought. You forget, for a moment, how hard the ground is, how thin the walls are, how far spring still feels. Later, when Thomas leaves, you sit alone by the fire. The mug is empty, but the smell of malt lingers in the air. You tilt your head back and close your eyes. You think of monks in distant monasteries, perfecting their brewing for centuries, turning faith into fermentation. You smile at the thought, monks and farmers, united by thirst and theology. You wonder if they, too, drink to forget the cold, or to remember warmth, maybe both. You place the mug back on the table, its wooden rim still warm from your hands. The wind howls outside, brushing against the walls like a hungry thing. You listen to it and feel, oddly, at peace. The day may be bleak, the food scarce, but you have your small fire, your stubborn humor, and your not-so-small beer. As you crawl back under the blanket for a mid-morning nap, yes. Breakfast beer will do that. You whisper to the empty room, to survival. One sip at a time. The candle beside you flickers, as if toasting back. You smile in the dim light, body finally warm, and let the hum of wind and faint buzz of barley carry you into a dream where the fields are green again. And every cup is full. The next morning greets you with a sour smell, sharp, tangy, alive. You blink, sniff again, and smile faintly. That scent isn't rot, it's salvation. You follow it to the corner shelf, where a collection of small clay jars sits neatly in the dim light. Inside them lives your secret weapon against winter despair, pickled vegetables. You lift one carefully, its surface cool to the touch. The lid, sealed with wax, cracks open with a soft pop and a wave of vinegary air escapes. It stings your nose, makes your mouth water, and for a fleeting moment, you feel rich. You fish out a small onion, translucent and glistening like a jewel. The first bite is electric, sour, salty, bright. Your whole face puckers, but your spirit lifts instantly. It tastes like memory and defiance, like someone trapped sunlight in a jar. Pickling is one of those miracles that kept medieval farmers alive long after their gardens froze. In summer, when vegetables overflowed, you'd slice and soak them in brine or vinegar, sealing them away for darker days. Carrots, beets, onions, cabbage, all transformed into tiny promises of freshness. It was preservation through patience and a bit of chemistry. Long before anyone knew what acidity meant. You reach for another jar. This one filled with cabbage and a handful of herbs. The brine has turned cloudy. The scent sharper. You take a cautious bite. It crunches, a satisfying, defiant sound in a season ruled by softness and silence. The flavor dances on your tongue, sour, spicy, with just a whisper of garlic. It's not just food, it's color, texture, rebellion. Thomas walks in without knocking, again. He sniffs the air and makes a face. Smells like feet. You grin, holding up a piece. Feet that saved my life. He hesitates, then shrugs and takes a bite. His eyes widen. It's actually good, he says between chews. Makes the bread taste less like despair. You chuckle. That's the slogan. Pickles, improving bark bread since forever. The two of you sit at the table, sharing from the same jar. Between bites, Thomas tells you how his grandmother believed vinegar could ward off evil spirits, or at least colds. She'd make us gargle it, he says, grimacing. Did it work? You ask. No idea, he replies, but we didn't have many demons. So maybe. Outside, snow falls again, thick and slow, blanketing everything in white silence. The window fogs with your breath as you lean closer. The world looks dead out there, trees frozen mid-dream, roofs sagging under frost. But here inside, in these jars, Life continues in miniature. You think back to late summer, when you and Greta worked side by side in the garden. She'd chopped onions while you gathered herbs. The sun had been warm, bees lazily circling, the air heavy with the smell of ripening cabbage. "Don't waste anything," she'd said, tossing scraps into the pot. "Come winter, you'll thank yourself." You smile. She was right. As always, you do thank yourself. Every bite a quiet act of gratitude. Historians still argue over whether medieval peasants had vinegar or used simple brine. The truth is, both worked, as long as the jar sealed tight and the salt was real. It wasn't science, it was survival instinct. Maybe that's why people said pickling had magic in it. In a way, it did. It captured the liveliness of summer and kept it breathing through the dark. You take another bite, this time savoring it. The acidity cuts through the heaviness of winter food, the bland stews, the salted meats, the gray bread. It wakes up your tongue, your mind, your hope. For a few moments, everything feels alive again. As night falls, you set the jars back carefully. One by one, the flicker of the fire catches their edges. And they glow softly, red, green, yellow, like lanterns of preserved sunlight. You whisper to them, half joking, half prayerful. "Hold on till spring." Before bed, you pour a small cup of the brine and sip it. It burns your throat and makes your eyes water. But you smile through the sting. It's not pleasant, but it's real. It's proof of effort, of foresight, of stubborn hope. You crawl beneath your blanket, the taste still bright on your tongue. Outside, the wind moans against the door. But inside, there's color, tang, and life, bottled reminders that warmth once existed and will come again. You close your eyes, and in the darkness, you can almost see the garden, green, buzzing, alive. You dream of sunlight dripping through cabbage leaves, of laughter, of bees, of vinegar jars clinking softly in the heat. Somewhere in that dream, you whisper to the air, "Hope tastes sour, but it keeps forever." The next dawn is silent, too silent. No bells, no laughter, not even the usual coughs echoing from neighboring cottages. Just the deep, cold hush of a world that feels like it's holding its breath. You lie there for a moment, staring at the frost webbing across your window like delicate white veins. Your stomach growls, low and patient. Hunger doesn't shout anymore, it whispers. Constant and persuasive. There's nothing left to trade. And the cellar looks emptier each day. You glance toward the hearth. The pottage pot sits cold and hollow. The root basket, once proud and full, now holds 2 onions that look as defeated as you feel. Which means there's only one option left. The forbidden one. You pull on your cloak and boots. Stiff with old snow. The forest waits beyond the village, dark, sprawling, dangerous. Technically, it belongs to the Lord. Like everything else that breathes or grows on his land. By law, peasants can't hunt there. The forest is his personal pantry. Full of deer and boar. Creatures worth more than any farmer's life. But hunger has its own laws. Thomas meets you by the frozen well. Bow slung across his shoulder. His grin is tight, nervous. "You sure?" he asks. You nod. "I'm not dying for obedience." He chuckles grimly. "Then let's go break the law." The snow deepens as you move into the trees. Branches creak under the weight of ice. Every sound feels amplified, your breath. Your boots. The faint snap of twigs. The forest isn't peaceful. It's alive, but quietly cruel. You can almost feel it watching you, as if it knows you don't belong here. You walk for what feels like hours. The world narrows to gray trunks and white silence. Finally, you spot them, rabbit tracks. Delicate as brush strokes, weaving between the roots. You kneel, fingers brushing the faint impressions. Thomas nocks an arrow. Slow and deliberate, you both freeze when a small movement catches your eye, a rabbit. Nose twitching, blending perfectly into the snow. Thomas releases. The arrow flies, silent and swift. It hits true. You both exhale at once. A rush of relief and guilt. You approach the little creature. Still and perfect against the white. "Forgive me," you whisper, as if the forest might hear. It's not much, barely enough meat for two. But it's something. You wrap it carefully in cloth. Hands shaking from cold and adrenaline. Thomas glances around, eyes wide. "Let's go before the reef sees us." You nod, though your legs feel rooted to the ground. Every shadow looks like accusation. You take the long way back, sticking to the river path. The ice groans beneath your boots. But you move quickly, praying the forest keeps your secret. By the time you reach the edge of the village, your heart has calmed. The church bell rings again in the distance, ironic timing. You glance at Thomas. "Absolution by soup," he jokes. Inside your cottage, you light the fire and hang the pot again. The rabbit goes in whole. Fur singed, the smell sharp and wild. It's been months since you've smelled real meat cooking. The air itself seems to lean closer. When the broth begins to bubble, the scent fills every corner. You can almost feel your bones sigh. You and Thomas eat in near silence. Reverent, the meat is tough, gamey, and perfect. Each bite tastes like rebellion. Like victory over the cold. Over the rules. Over the Lord who's never gone a day hungry in his life. You laugh softly, a sound halfway between joy and disbelief. "We're criminals now," you say. Thomas grins, mouth full. "Then prison better serve stew." Historians still debate how often peasants poached from their lords. Some say it was rare. Others say it was survival's open secret. You suspect it was both. Everyone knew. No one said. The forest took its price from everyone eventually. Whether in hunger or punishment. As the pot empties, the warmth settles deep in your chest. You lean back against the wall, eyes closed, savoring the heat. For once, the fire feels generous. Outside, the wind whistles softly through the trees. But it sounds less like warning now, more like applause. Later, when Thomas leaves, you step outside and glance toward the woods. The moon hangs low, silvering the branches. Somewhere in the darkness, something moves. Maybe a fox. Maybe just your imagination. You whisper into the cold air, "Thank you." The trees don't answer, but the silence feels softer somehow. You return inside, douse the fire to embers, and crawl into bed. The scent of cooked meat still lingers in the air, faint, smoky, sacred. You smile into your blanket. For the first time all winter, your stomach is full, your conscience light enough to sleep. And as your eyes drift closed, you think about the forest, the danger, the hunger, the heartbeat of life beneath the snow. You promise yourself you'll stay away next time. You know you won't. The snow has stopped, but the world still looks empty, colorless fields, Pale sky, the same gray routine, yet even as hunger fades for a day or two after the rabbit, another kind of shadow falls across the village. Not from clouds this time, but from the church bell again. It tolls differently now, slower, solemn, insistent. You know that sound. It means Lent has begun. You groan quietly, pulling the blanket over your head. Lent. 40 days of fasting, of denying the body so the soul might rise. It's a noble idea. In theory. In practice, it's 40 days of pretending you're fasting for God instead of because there's no food left. You lie there, half praying, half cursing, before finally getting up. Outside, the village looks strangely still. Even the smoke from chimneys feels subdued, as if afraid to rise too high. Everyone's observing the rule: no meat, no fat, no indulgence, just fish, grains, and vegetables, if you have any left. You look at your pot and sigh. The rabbit bones still rest inside, stripped bare, mocking you. At the well, Thomas stands with a bucket in hand, looking about as cheerful as a stone. Happy Lent, you say dryly. He smirks. Ah yes, my favorite season. Guilt and cabbage. You both laugh quietly, because humor is the only rebellion left. The church has already issued its proclamation. You've heard it every year. Abstain from flesh, and purify your heart, which is convenient, since flesh has been a luxury since December. You wonder if the priests ever notice the irony. Still, rules are rules. So you gather what's left, a few dried peas, some oats, a pinch of salt, and start your Lent stew. It's pale, watery, and joyless, but it fills the pot. And that's something. You drop in a few sprigs of dried herbs. The last gift of summer. As it simmers, the smell rises, faint, green, like a ghost of the garden. By midday, you and Thomas sit side by side, bowls in hand. Bean soup again, he mutters, poking at it. At least the beans are holy now. You grin. Holy because they're full of holes? He laughs, snorting. Exactly. You take a bite. It's bland but comforting, the flavor of surrender. The warmth seeps slowly through you. Dull but steady. Across the village, other fires burn the same way. Small and uniform, like a choir of quiet endurance. Everyone fasting, everyone pretending it's devotion. Historians like to say Lent brought spiritual unity to the Middle Ages. Maybe it did. You imagine the lords up on their hill, foregoing meat in solidarity, though their fasting probably includes salmon, butter, and enough wine to drown a sermon. Down here, Lent feels less like faith and more like paperwork. A few days pass, the hunger sharpens, but strangely, you begin to get used to it. The rhythm of denial becomes its own kind of peace. Your stomach stops growling so loudly. Your body slows. Your mind drifts. You find yourself thinking clearer somehow, or maybe you're just too tired to think at all. One evening, you walk to the frozen stream to fetch water. The sky glows faintly pink, a rare hint of beauty in the monotony. You kneel, chip through the ice, and watch the dark water swirl beneath. For a moment, you imagine drinking it all, breaking every rule, a glutton of water, a sinner of simplicity. You laugh softly at the thought. Even temptation has become modest. Back home, you sip a little beer. Weak but warm. Lent doesn't forbid that, thankfully. You chew a piece of coarse bread dipped in the thin pea broth. The combination tastes like effort. Not pleasure, but effort can be holy. 2. You remember your mother's voice. Long gone now. Fasting isn't about punishment. It's about remembering what matters. You glance at the small loaf of bark bread, the pot of dull soup, the single candle burning low. Maybe she was right. Maybe gratitude needs emptiness to echo inside. On the third Sunday of Lent, the priest preaches about temptation. His words bounce off the cold stone walls. To resist the flesh is to strengthen the spirit. You glance at Thomas beside you, whispering, "I think my spirit's strong enough to lift a cow by now." He snorts, earning a glare from the priest. After Mass, Father Ulrich hands out tiny dried fish, the church's sanctioned treat. You accept it reverently, then bite in. It's hard as leather, salty enough to desiccate your tongue. But you smile anyway. It tastes like rebellion wrapped in obedience. The days stretch on. Lent becomes less of a test and more of a rhythm, hunger and prayer. Prayer and hunger. At night, you dream of feasts, golden loaves, roasted meat, rivers of cream. You wake with the taste of air in your mouth and a strange sort of peace in your chest. When Easter finally comes, the bells will ring bright and wild, and the tables will overflow again, or at least, they'll try to, but that's still far away. Tonight, you sip the last of your humble soup, whisper a lazy prayer, and crawl into bed. As you drift towards sleep, your stomach hums quietly, neither full nor empty. You think, not for the first time, that faith and hunger have the same sound, a quiet longing for something more. Outside, the wind sighs through the eaves, like a monk whispering a psalm to the stars. And for once, you don't feel mocked by it. You just listen, eyes closed, and let the quiet carry you to sleep. Morning begins with sound before sight, the dull thud of a knife against wood, the soft sigh of a fire catching, the faint hiss of something simmering. You're not dreaming, you're in the kitchen. The small, smoky, winter kitchen, the heart of every medieval home. No matter how poor. You stretch and pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders. The air's still cold enough to sting. Smoke curls lazily toward the thatched roof, weaving through cracks in the timber. You can taste it in the air, sharp, familiar, oddly comforting. For all its discomfort, the kitchen is the only place that still feels alive in winter. You shuffle toward the hearth, where a pot hangs over a low flame. The fire's glow paints the stone walls gold, and the scent, a mix of onion, ash, and something vaguely edible, greets you like an old friend. You stir the pot, watching the bubbles rise and burst, sending up thin wisps of steam. It's the same stew as yesterday, and the day before, but somehow the smell always brings a flicker of hope. Your fingers are stiff, nails rimmed with dirt, but they know their work. You peel turnips and scrape carrots, saving every shaving. Nothing goes to waste here, not even the peelings. The table creaks beneath your weight as you lean over it, slicing slow and steady. Each movement feels like prayer, rhythmic, quiet, necessary. Thomas ducks through the doorframe, brushing snow from his cloak. "Smells like food," he says, eyes bright. "Barely," you reply, half smiling. "But it's warm," he laughs, rubbing his hands by the fire. "At this point, I'd eat warmth." He means it, too. Everyone would. You drop a few scraps of root into the pot and add a ladle of water. The fire spits, complaining softly. The room fills with the gentle crackle of burning wood, a sound that always feels like company. Medieval kitchens weren't places of comfort, they were battles fought with fire and patience. No windows, just smoke holes, no pans, just iron pots hung by chains. Every meal demanded improvisation, luck, and stubborn faith. You've learned all three. Thomas finds a stool and sits, rubbing his hands together. Remember when we thought winter stew was bad? He says. That was before Lent turned it into flavored water. You grin, shaking your head. Careful, that's blasphemy. He shrugs. If the Lord's watching, he can join us for dinner. You ladle out 2 bowls. The steam rises like ghosts of summers past. It's thin but fragrant, onions, barley, a memory of salt. You hand him one and blow gently on your own before tasting. It's hot, earthy, grounding. It tastes like surviving. As you eat, you watch the room. The wooden shelves sag with old pottery and bits of dried herbs. A few onions hang from a beam, shriveled but proud. The floor is dirt, swept clean every morning. It's not grand, but it's home, a tiny kingdom ruled by necessity. The air hums softly with life, the pop of sap in the logs, the occasional rattle of the iron hook, the whisper of wind sneaking under the door. You've lived in this room more than any other. It's where hunger, hope, and exhaustion all meet at the same table. You remember your mother standing here years ago. Her sleeves rolled up, face flushed from the heat. She could stretch a handful of barley into a meal for 6. Her hands always smelled of smoke and thyme. You smile at the memory. Even as it hurts a little, the kind of ache that feels warm instead of sharp. Thomas breaks the silence. You ever think about how the Lord eats? He asks. Chewing slowly. You raise an eyebrow. Constantly. He grins. No, I mean, his kitchen must be huge. More cooks than we've got spoons. You nod. And yet, I bet they still complain about the bread being too dry. You both laugh, the sound mingling with the hiss of the fire. It's a small, ordinary moment, the kind that makes survival possible. After eating, you tend the fire again, feeding it a few more sticks. The flames flare up, painting everything in shades of orange. You hang a small pot of water above it to heat for washing. The steam fogs the air, softening the outlines of everything, the walls, the table, even Thomas, who sits humming a tune that's half prayer, half lullaby. Historians often write about medieval banquets, but not kitchens like this. They forget that most of life happens here, not in grand halls, but in smoky corners where people stir, share, and endure. You smile at that thought. A private bit of pride. No one writes about you, but you're the reason the world keeps going. As the light fades, the shadows grow longer. The kitchen becomes a cave of warmth in a sea of frost. You sit near the fire, legs tucked beneath you, feeling your heartbeat sync with the slow rhythm of the flames. Outside, snow begins to fall again, soft as ash. Inside, the last bubbles of stew rise and burst with quiet grace. You breathe deeply, letting the scent of smoke and onions fill your lungs. You close your eyes and listen, to the crackle, to the wind, to your own slow breath. The kitchen hums like a lullaby, ancient and eternal. And just before sleep pulls you under, you murmur into the still air, "We'll make it through." The fire answers with one soft pop, the smallest applause in the smallest room, keeping the night at bay. You wake to the sound of coughing, deep, wet, too human to ignore. It's coming from the cottage next door. You sit up, groggy, listening through the thin wall of wattle and daub. The sound rattles like dry wood in a storm. Winter doesn't just starve, it also sickens. You pull on your cloak, grab your small pouch of herbs, and step out into the icy morning. Greta's standing outside her door, face pale, wrapped in shawls. "He's worse," she says, voice trembling. You nod, stepping inside without another word. Her husband lies on the straw bed, skin gray, eyes glassy. The air smells sharp, smoke, sweat, and fear. You kneel beside him, checking his forehead, hot as the hearth. In the Middle Ages, medicine and meals were often the same thing. You don't have a doctor, only recipes, prayers, and hope disguised as soup. You tell Greta to fetch water, then set to work. From your pouch, you pull dried sage, a few strands of rosemary, and something rare, honey. You mix them into a pot with the last of her onions. The aroma rises quickly, sweet, earthy, full of desperate optimism. Smells like a feast. Greta whispers. You smile faintly. Let's hope it heals like one. As it simmers, the steam fills the room, softening the harsh edges of the cold. The sound of the man's breathing steadies a little. Maybe the heat helps. Or maybe the smell fools the body into remembering what comfort feels like. You hand him a spoonful of broth. He swallows slowly, grimacing, but color creeps back into his cheeks. In a world without science, faith and herbs walked hand in hand. You remember the old sayings: thyme for courage, rosemary for memory, garlic for protection, sage for wisdom and for colds. Whether they worked or not hardly mattered. Belief itself was medicine. Greta stirs the pot beside you, her hands shaking. My mother used to hang onions in the doorway. She says quietly, said they sucked sickness out of the air. You nod. Maybe they do. You've never seen it work. But you've never seen it fail either. Thomas appears at the door, peeking in. You playing doctor now? He teases gently. You shrug. Chef, healer, miracle worker, same job this winter. He grins. Add savior to the list if it works. He helps fetch more wood while you feed the fire. The flames brighten, licking at the pot like eager tongues. Greta hums softly under her breath, a lullaby or a charm. You can't tell. The sound blends with the bubbling of the soup, forming a strange harmony. After a while, you ladle a bit more into a cup and taste it yourself. The broth is salty and sweet, heavy with herbs. It feels alive in your mouth. You can't tell if it's medicine, but it's warm, and right now, that's enough. As the day wears on, the fever breaks. Greta's husband drifts into a quieter sleep, his breathing no longer ragged. She sinks into a chair, tears welling up. Thank you, she whispers. You shake your head. Thank the herbs. She presses a bundle of dried lavender into your hand. For you, she says, to keep the spirits away. You smile. If they smell this, they'll run. Historians write about medieval superstition like it's foolishness: garlic necklaces, charms made of bone, prayers whispered over boiling pots. But living here, you understand, when you have nothing else to fight with, belief becomes armor. Hope itself is medicinal. Back at your own cottage, you hang the lavender near the door. The scent fills the room, floral, clean, like a summer memory trapped in purple. You add a pinch of leftover herbs to your stew that night. Just because. It doesn't taste much different, but you swear it warms you faster. Maybe it's in your head. Maybe that's where all healing begins. As you eat, you think of Greta's words, of the songs your mother used to hum when you were sick, about saints who cured fevers and angels who blessed broth. You hum softly yourself, letting the melody weave into the crackle of the fire. Outside, the snow falls again, thick and gentle. The world is still frozen. But inside, something feels alive, faint, invisible, but real. You breathe deeply, inhaling smoke and lavender and the stubborn scent of survival. You glance at the little pot, still simmering slowly. Maybe it's true what the old women say. Food made with care carries its own kind of magic. You smile at that thought, spooning another bite, letting it rest warm on your tongue. The line between faith and medicine blurs in the glow of the firelight. Maybe it doesn't need to be clear. Maybe healing has always been a little bit of both. You stretch, feeling the ache in your back ease slightly. The wind hums against the wall like a tired choir. You close your eyes, the lavender scent lingering, and whisper, "Good enough." And in the quiet, it feels like the world agrees. The next day dawns soft and gray. The kind of light that barely counts as morning. The fire is weak, your stomach emptier than it should be. But outside, there's laughter, high, bright, and absurdly out of place. You pull on your boots and open the door to find a group of children tumbling through the snow, shrieking like the cold doesn't exist. They're bundled in rags and mismatched furs. Noses red, hands bare. One of them, little Will, Greta's youngest, has a wooden stick he's pretending is a sword. Another girl drags a broken basket tied to a rope, shouting, "It's a sled." You can't help but smile. Hunger might dull the grown, but it never fully tames the young. "Don't they ever get cold?" you mutter as Thomas appears beside you. Rubbing his hands, "They don't notice," he says. "Empty bellies weigh less, makes running easier." You snort, shaking your head, but you both stand there for a while, watching. Children have a strange kind of magic in winter. They can turn hunger into games, frost into imagination. You watch Will scoop up a handful of snow and form it into a crude ball. He lobs it at the girl with the sled. She yelps, then retaliates with a fierce throw that misses him entirely and smacks Thomas on the shoulder. He freezes, mock offended. The children gasp, giggling. "You've declared war," he says gravely, then scoops up a handful of snow and fires back. Within seconds, the quiet village transforms into a battlefield of laughter. You join in before you realize it, ducking behind a barrel, throwing, laughing, real laughter, the kind that makes your ribs ache. For a brief, foolish moment, you forget the gnawing emptiness, the frozen ground, the constant fear. You're just breath and joy and snow. When the truce comes, everyone's breathless. Will's cheeks glow pink. "You fight worse than my gran," he teases. You ruffle his hair. "Your gran fights dirty." You reply. He grins, proud. "That's why she wins." You retreat to your cottage, shaking snow from your sleeves. Thomas follows, chuckling. "Feels good to laugh," he says, "like stealing warmth." You nod. Maybe laughter's the only thing that multiplies when you share it. He grins. Then we should tax it. Inside, the air smells faintly of smoke and stale bread. You break a small piece from the loaf, it's hard. But the children's joy lingers in you, softening everything. You eat slowly, imagining it's sweeter than it is. Outside, their laughter continues, fading and returning like waves. You sit by the window, watching them build something in the snow, a crooked little house. Walls barely knee-high, they're stacking frozen clumps of earth as if they're stones, pretending to build their own village. One of them declares herself the Queen of Frost. Another insists he's Lord of the Turnips. It's ridiculous and perfect. You remember being their age, chasing geese through muddy fields, stealing apples from the monastery garden, laughing until your stomach hurt. Back then, winter felt like an adventure, not a sentence. You close your eyes, half smiling. Maybe that's why children survive better than anyone. They don't carry memory heavy on their backs. By afternoon, the game turns quiet. The smaller ones grow tired. You see Greta appear at her doorway, calling them in. Her voice is softer today, relief still clinging to it after her husband's recovery. She waves to you, and you wave back. Life, it seems, still insists on happening. Thomas leans against the wall, watching the last few kids trudge home. When I was little, he says, we used to make snow angels. My mother said each one kept us warm for a day. You chuckle. You believe her? He shrugs. I was warm enough to try. Historians often write about famine and plague, but rarely about the laughter that sneaks through them. The small rebellions of children, playing in the snow when their parents ration bread. Turning starvation into games, are what keep a village human. Maybe that's the real miracle, not surviving, but staying alive in spirit. As night falls, you hear soft knocking. Will appears at your door, holding something in his hands. For you, he says shyly, it's a tiny snowball, packed tight, with a twig stuck on top like a candle. A gift, he explains, for helping Mama. You kneel, smiling despite the lump in your throat. It's beautiful, you say. Does it have magic? He nods solemnly. It doesn't melt if you believe hard enough. You take it gently, placing it by the window. When he leaves, you watch it glisten in the firelight, small, silly, already melting. You whisper, I believe, just to see what happens. By the time you crawl into bed, the snowball is a puddle. But the warmth remains. The children's laughter echoes faintly in the distance. Fading into the wind, you close your eyes, a faint smile still on your lips. Hunger waits for tomorrow, but tonight, joy had its turn. It's been weeks since you last felt anything close to celebration, but tonight, something stirs in the village. A faint hum of voices, the distant clang of a bell, and the unmistakable scent of smoke. Thick and sweet, you step outside and see orange light flickering between the houses. A fire, a good one. Feast day, Thomas says behind you, already grinning. Saint Brigid, I think. He shrugs. Or maybe Saint someone else. Doesn't matter. There's food. You both exchange a look that's half excitement, half disbelief. The villagers are gathering in the square, bundled in cloaks and scarves. In the center, a bonfire roars to life, crackling and spitting sparks into the dark sky. The flames lick the frozen air, painting faces gold and shadows long. Someone's beating a drum, off rhythm. Enthusiastic. Children dance, chasing the glow. For the first time in months, the cold doesn't feel cruel. You edge closer, the heat washing over your skin. Someone passes a jug of ale, weak but warm, and you take a sip. It burns down your throat, spreads to your chest like courage. The smell of roasting barley cakes drifts from the fire, unevenly cooked, but still miraculous. Greta waves you over and hands you one. It's rough, she warns, made with love and what's left of the flour. You take a bite anyway. It's sweet, smoky, and dense. Tastes like heaven, you say through a mouthful. These feasts of faith are strange things. The church encourages them, reminders that even in hardship, gratitude is required. But you know the truth. They're less about religion and more about defiance. People need something to burn besides hope. Someone begins a song, low, lilting, a melody older than the language itself. Others join in, their voices rough but steady. The lyrics speak of warmth, of bread, of saints who shared their food with wolves. You hum along quietly, not for piety, but because it feels right. Thomas, predictably, finds the ale again. He passes the jug to you, grinning. Blessed be the saint who invented this. You snort, pretty sure it was a monk. He raises an eyebrow. Then blessed be monks. The fire crackles, sparks bursting like tiny suns. You feel the heat on your face, the sting of cold air on your back, the perfect balance between survival and celebration. Around you, people laugh louder than they should. For once, nobody whispers about hunger or sickness or debt. Just laughter, singing, and the sound of boots thumping against frozen earth. You notice Greta dancing with her children, spinning slowly in the firelight. The smallest one claps off beat, shrieking with delight. The sight makes your throat tighten. You can't remember the last time you saw joy so simple, so unashamed. You lean toward Thomas. It feels strange, doesn't it? He looks at you. What does? To laugh when there's still hunger. He nods, serious now. Maybe that's why we do it, to remind the cold it hasn't won yet. Historians talk about medieval feasts like they were endless extravaganzas, meat piled high, goblets overflowing, but here, a few barley cakes, a single jug of ale, and a fire big enough to chase shadows count as luxury. And maybe they're right to call it a miracle. Because somehow, it is. Later in the night, the songs turn softer. Someone passes around a bowl of stew, mostly water, but flavored with smoke and shared hands. You sip it slowly, letting the warmth spread. Each mouthful carries the taste of something bigger, community. Father Ulrich appears at some point, drawn by the light. His expression is part pride, part warning. Remember, he calls, we feast to honor God, not the flesh. Thomas whispers, speak for yourself, and you nearly choke trying not to laugh. The priest blesses the fire, sprinkles holy water that hisses and pops in the flames. The crowd murmurs, Amen. But the energy doesn't fade. The villagers keep singing, quieter now, like a lullaby to themselves. You tilt your head back, staring up at the sky. The smoke climbs into the stars, curling like prayers. For once, you let yourself believe that maybe they're being heard. The warmth on your face feels holy, or close enough. When the fire begins to die, people drift home, Clutching their half-empty mugs and tired children. You stay behind a little longer. Watching the embers pulse. Each spark that rises feels like a promise, brief but beautiful. Thomas tosses one last stick into the fire. For next time, he says. You nod. For next time. You walk home through the hush that follows a feast, the good kind of silence. Heavy with warmth, the world seems softer somehow. As if the night itself is sighing in contentment. Back in your cottage, you sit by your own fire. Smaller but steady, the smell of smoke clings to your hair and clothes. The echo of laughter still in your ears. You smile faintly, whispering to the shadows, maybe faith is just the art of pretending you're full. You crawl into bed with that thought. The faint glow of the village fire still flickering in your mind. Outside, the wind moans, softer now, like even it has been fed. The firewood pile has shrunk to a shadow of itself. And the air tastes different now, less like smoke, more like dust. The snow is supposed to melt by now. By all reason, spring should have come weeks ago. But reason doesn't govern the weather. And this year, winter refuses to die. You wake one morning to find frost glittering on the doorframe again. Thicker than ever, even the air inside feels brittle. You sit up slowly, joints aching from cold and hunger. The pottage pot is empty. The bread is gone, and the root cellar, you don't even need to check. You already know what's waiting there. Nothing. Thomas knocks softly before you can gather your strength. He looks worse than usual, eyes hollow. Lips cracked. Still no thaw. He says simply, you just nod. Words cost energy now. The two of you sit in silence for a long time. The fire burning low between you. Finally, Thomas speaks again. Voice low. I planted early last year. He says, if spring doesn't come soon, all the seed'll rot. You know what he's really saying. That hunger isn't just now, it's coming for the future too. By noon, the village looks deserted. Smoke rises from almost no chimneys. The air carries no laughter. No sound of axes or footsteps. Just the wind, steady, mournful. The people who can still move are inside, hoarding warmth, rationing hope. You go to the cellar anyway. Out of habit, the smell hits you before the darkness does, damp earth and mold. You run your hand along the wall until your fingers touch the old basket of grain. You lift it, empty. Only a thin layer of dust at the bottom, shimmering faintly in the light of your candle. That dust is all that stands between survival and ruin, the seed grain for next season's crop. You know what must never be done. Don't eat the seed. It's the oldest law of farming, older than kings or priests. But laws don't fill bellies. You bring the basket upstairs anyway, setting it by the fire. Thomas looks at you, eyes wide. Don't tell me. You don't answer. He sighs, rubbing his temples. If we eat it, there's no harvest. You stare into the fire. If we don't, we won't be alive to plant it. Silence stretches between you. Outside, the wind howls like an argument on your behalf. Finally, he says, half. You nod. You grind the seeds with a stone, mixing them with warm water and a pinch of salt. The smell is faint, nutty, almost sweet. You pour the paste onto a flat rock near the fire. The batter hisses softly, turning brown around the edges. It's barely food, just heat and desperation in solid form. When it's done, you split the thin cakes. They steam faintly, fragile as promises. You bite in. It's warm, chewy, bitter. It fills your mouth more than your stomach. Thomas chews slowly, eyes on the fire. Never thought we'd eat next year's hope. He says quietly. You don't reply. There's nothing to say. The meal feels like confession, the kind that can't be forgiven. Historians sometimes call this the hungry gap, the cruel space between winter and harvest. When stores run dry and fields still sleep. But living it, you know it's more than hunger. It's a kind of grief. You're eating the future one bite at a time. Days pass in this suspended season. The snow melts slightly, then freezes again. Streams swell, then harden. The world seems caught between breaths. The people grow quieter, slower, thinner. Even laughter, when it comes, sounds hollow. One evening, you sit alone by the fire, turning the last handful of seeds over in your palm. They're smooth, golden, deceptively alive. You whisper to them, half prayer, half apology. I'll plant you next year. You say softly, if next year comes. You press one between your fingers. Just to feel something solid. It cracks. You stare at the broken halves. Then close your fist around them. That night, you dream of green fields, endless waves of wheat under a warm sky. You can almost feel the sun on your face. The soil soft under your feet. You wake up smiling, for the first time in weeks. Until you realize the sound in your ears isn't wind, it's rain. Real rain. You rush outside, bare feet sinking into the slush. The air smells new, wet earth, thawing roots, life. The drops are cold, sharp, glorious. You tilt your face upward and let them sting your skin. The sky, at long last, has remembered mercy. Thomas emerges from his hut, blinking in disbelief. It's over? He asks. You grin, water dripping from your hair. Not yet, you say, but it's beginning. You laugh, hoarse, wild, free, as the rain soaks you both. The ground drinks greedily, as if the earth itself were starving. You whisper to the gray sky, voice trembling. You took your time. And for the first time in months, hope doesn't feel like betrayal. It feels like hunger turning back into life. The rain didn't last. It came, teased the earth with promise, then vanished, like a dream too fragile to hold. Now the world has gone still again, hushed and brittle, as if afraid to move. The puddles froze overnight, thin as glass, and the fields lie bare under a pale moon. You lie awake, listening to the hollow quiet. Even the wind seems to have grown tired. The fire in the hearth has dwindled to embers. Soft and red, you can hear every small sound, the creak of wood, the distant hoot of an owl, the low murmur of your own stomach reminding you of its emptiness. You rise slowly, wrapping a threadbare blanket around your shoulders. The room smells faintly of ash and smoke, the scent of too many nights spent burning things that shouldn't burn. The last of the firewood went yesterday, so now you feed the fire scraps of broken tools, old baskets, even a chair leg. Survival devours everything, piece by piece. You lift the pot by the hearth, hoping for something, anything. The bottom is coated in a thin layer of dried broth. Nothing more. You scrape it with a spoon. Then stop. The sound feels too loud, too desperate. You set it down and sit beside the fire. Knees drawn up, eyes half closed. Across the room, Thomas stirs under his blanket. Anything left? he asks, his voice barely above a whisper. You shake your head. Not yet. Maybe tomorrow. He laughs softly, not humor. Just exhaustion. You said that yesterday. You smile faintly. I'll say it again tomorrow. 2. There's nothing else to do. Words cost nothing, and sometimes they trick the body into patience. Outside, the village sleeps. No fires flicker. No dogs bark. Even hunger has fallen silent. Too weak to roar, the moonlight spills over everything, turning the world silver and cold. You watch it through the small window, your breath fogging the glass. For a moment, it's beautiful, cruelly, impossibly beautiful. You think about what the historians will never know. They'll write about famine in numbers, harvest yields, grain prices, mortality rates, but they'll never write about this: the sound of an empty pot at midnight, the taste of smoke on your tongue, the way the air itself feels heavier when there's nothing left to eat. You pull your cloak tighter, trying to remember warmth. You think of summer, the smell of grass after rain, the hum of bees, the first bite of ripe apple. It feels like another life, one that belonged to someone luckier. Thomas mutters something in his sleep. You can't make out the words, but you catch a name, Greta. You smile sadly. Love survives even hunger. Though it changes shape, it becomes smaller, quieter, a look instead of a gesture, a shared silence instead of a feast. You glance toward the tiny wooden cross above the door. You watching all this? You whisper. The silence answers. Maybe that's all prayer really is. Speaking into a void and hoping it's listening. You decide to go outside. The air bites your face. Sharp and clean, your boots crunch over frost. The sound echoing across the still village. Above, the stars shimmer like frost themselves, cold, bright, eternal. You walk toward the frozen fields. The moonlight paints them white, endless. You kneel, brushing the surface with your hand. The earth feels hard, dead, but you know better. It's sleeping, not gone, somewhere beneath this frozen skin. Seeds, even the ones you didn't eat, are waiting. You close your eyes and press your palm against the ground. Rest well, you whisper. We'll wake together. When you return to your cottage, the fire has nearly gone out. Thomas is awake, staring at the ceiling. Still nothing out there? He asks. You shake your head. Nothing yet. He nods slowly. Then tomorrow, he says. You lie down again, pulling the blanket close. The air is cold enough to sting your lungs. The fire gives one last pop before surrendering to ash. The darkness folds around you, heavy but soft, like the earth itself drawing its blanket over the world. Your stomach aches, but your mind drifts. You think of the rain, of laughter by the fire, of children playing in the snow. You think of the taste of pickled onions, of the smell of fresh bread, of the way the first green shoots will look when they finally break the soil. The night presses closer. You let it. Hunger hums like a lullaby in your chest. The silence grows thick and deep. Somewhere between waking and sleep, you think you hear it, the faintest sound, almost imagined, dripping, melting, the whisper of ice giving way. You smile in the dark, eyes still closed. Tomorrow, you murmur. And this time, you almost believe it. It begins quietly, so quietly that at first, you think it's a trick of the light, a sliver of color, almost hidden beneath the last crust of frost near the edge of the path. You kneel, heart hammering, and there it is, a single green shoot, delicate as a breath, slicing through the frozen earth. You stare at it for a long moment, half afraid to touch it, as though your hand might frighten it back underground. The world is still cold, the air sharp, but this tiny stem, means everything. You lean closer and whisper, "You're late." Thomas appears behind you, rubbing his eyes. "Talking to plants now?" he says, smiling weakly. You grin back. Someone has to welcome them. He crouches beside you, squinting at the fragile thing. "I'll be damned," he murmurs. "It's real." The sun feels warmer that morning, though maybe it's just your imagination. The frost melts a little quicker. The ground, still stubborn, softens near the surface. For the first time in months, the air smells of soil instead of smoke. You breathe deeply, savoring it like a feast. The green shoot is only one, but it changes everything. Hope has weight again. It fills your chest, heavy and warm. You walk to the field later, boots sinking into the thawing mud. The ground squelches, an ugly sound. But to your ears, it's music. The world is exhaling. Other villagers emerge too, drawn by the light, the smell, the promise. Greta waves from her doorway, hair tangled, face flushed with excitement. "It's starting," she calls. You nod, laughing. It's about time. Even Father Ulrich looks different that day. Less like a statue and more like a man. He stands in front of the church, his robes muddy at the hem, and smiles at the sky. "A miracle," he says. "For once, you don't roll your eyes." "Maybe it is." The village slowly comes alive again. The children are the first to find joy. As always, they splash in the puddles, shrieking with laughter, chasing the little streams that form along the paths. Thomas chuckles. "They'll catch pneumonia." You shrug. "Let them catch something other than hunger." The thaw reveals everything that winter tried to hide: broken fences, fallen roofs, bones of animals, and, sometimes, worse, the world looks wounded, but not defeated. You help dig out the tools. The plows, the baskets. They're rough, cracked, but usable, like you. That evening, you and Thomas sit by the fire, a proper one this time. Burning real wood. The room smells less like despair and more like smoke and sap. You hold your hands to the heat, eyes heavy but alive. "We made it," he says softly. You nod. "Barely." He grins. "Barely counts." The next morning, you walk to the field again. The green shoot is still there, standing taller now, defiant. You kneel and press your palm into the damp soil beside it. The earth is cold, but soft, ready. You take the last handful of seeds you've been hoarding and sprinkle them carefully into the ground. Each one lands with a tiny sound, like hope tapping the world awake. You cover them gently, whispering the same promise you made in winter: "We'll wake together." Historians like to write about the great harvests, the golden fields, the festivals, the abundance, but no one ever writes about this moment. The first sprout, the first sigh of life breaking the silence. Maybe they should, because this quiet resurrection, is what truly matters. As the sun climbs higher, the world begins to shimmer with melting water. Roofs drip steadily, and streams cut through the thawing fields. The air hums faintly with the sound of life returning. You close your eyes and listen. It's messy, chaotic, beautiful, the sound of survival. Later, Greta stops by with a small jar of pickled carrots. One of her last. She presses it into your hands. For the planting, she says. You shake your head. Keep it. She smiles. I have the garden now. You take it. You open it that night and eat slowly, savoring the sour-sweet bite. The taste makes you close your eyes, not because it's delicious, but because it tastes like tomorrow. Before bed, you step outside one last time. The stars are out, bright and sharp, and the fields stretch before you, dark and breathing. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls, and you can hear the faintest rustle of wind through the wet grass. You whisper into the cool air, "We're still here." The world doesn't answer. It doesn't need to. The proof is already pushing up through the soil. The green has come back. Slowly at first, tender blades of grass. Patches of color clinging to the edges of fields. But now the hills glow soft and alive again. The birds have returned too. Bold and noisy, as if mocking the long silence that ruled the land all winter. You stand in the field one morning, soil damp beneath your boots, and watch the wind ripple through the young crops like a tide of forgiveness. You breathe in deeply. The air smells different, wet, rich, sweet. After months of ash and frost, the scent of life feels almost unreal. You kneel, touch the soil, and it clings to your fingers like a handshake from an old friend. The first sprouts of barley tremble in the breeze. They're fragile, but confident. You envy that. Thomas joins you, carrying a basket of tools. His face looks older, leaner, but his eyes are bright. Feels strange, he says, squinting at the field. After all that hunger, seeing green again, you nod, strange in the best way. He laughs softly. I thought I'd never hear you say best again. You smile faintly. Don't get used to it. The days lengthen, and life slowly settles into rhythm again. The sound of hoes striking soil, the creak of wagons, the laughter of children chasing each other along the path. The village hums with work, not celebration. Exactly, but gratitude disguised as labor. You help Greta mend her fence. You share a loaf of real bread with Thomas. Still warm, its crust cracking under your hands. The smell nearly brings you to tears. Historians may call this recovery, but you know it's more than that. It's resurrection. The world didn't simply survive winter, it remade itself. So did you. But even as the sun warms your back, a memory lingers, not sharp like hunger, but soft, like an echo. The memory of empty nights, of silence, of scraping the bottom of a pot and pretending it was enough. It doesn't haunt you, it humbles you. You keep one of the bark loaves from winter, hard as stone now, tucked away on a shelf. Not to eat, but to remember. To remind yourself how close you came to the edge, and how you stepped back. Sometimes, when the fields glow gold and the air smells of grain, you think of that long, frozen season and how it changed you. Hunger taught you more than comfort ever could. It taught you patience, gratitude, the quiet art of finding warmth in others. One evening, as the sun slips behind the hills, you sit by your door watching the light fade over the fields. The sky burns orange and violet, and the air hums with insects again, that simple, miraculous noise of life going on. You close your eyes and let the warmth wash over you. Thomas sits beside you, chewing a blade of grass. Think we'll ever forget it? He asks. You shake your head slowly. No, and maybe we shouldn't. He nods. Good, because next winter, I'm staying in your cottage. You've got better soup. You laugh softly. The sound blends with the rustle of the field, the whisper of wind, the low song of evening birds. The world feels full again, not just of food, but of meaning. You stand and stretch, your back aching pleasantly from a day spent planting. The last light fades, and the first stars appear. Shy and silver, the night air is cool but kind. Inside, the fire crackles gently. You sit by it one last time, tracing patterns in the light, watching the shadows sway. The warmth on your face is soft and deep, and you realize something you hadn't before: you're not hungry anymore. Not in any sense of the word. You whisper to the fire, to the earth, to the sleeping seeds beneath the soil, "Thank you." And as the night thickens, the world grows quiet again, not the silence of hunger, but of peace. The wind drifts through the eaves like a lullaby. Your eyes grow heavy. The crackle of the hearth becomes a rhythm, steady and slow. The green fields fade in your mind's eye, replaced by darkness soft as velvet. The earth hums quietly beneath you. Your heartbeat slows to match it, calm, content, alive. The long winter is over. End of script. Sweet dreams.